Keeper of the Lost Cities, Everblaze, Chapter 42. The Ogre King, Sophie thought slowly, fairly certain her brain was about to call it quits. He wasn't dressed like a king, at least not by elven standards, or human standards for that matter. The only clothing he wore was like riveted steel underwear, and his body was shaped like a hairless gorilla on a massive amount of steroids, with skin that reminded Sophie of weathered marble. He carried no weapons and arrived with no guards, and while he did have enormous glittering yellow stones set into the centers of his stretched-out earlobes, he had no crown, no scepter, no signet ring. His bald head was marked with some sort of black squiggly patterns, but it didn't look kingly. It pretty much just screamed, "This dude is scary." Still, there was something regal about the way he fearlessly faced the goblins, all of whom were at least a foot taller than him. And his scratchy voice held authority as he turned to Sandor and said, "Settle down, goblin. I'm only here to pay my respects." For a second, Sophie thought Sandor was going to pounce, but his snarl faded to a glare as he stepped back and said, "Then allow us to clear you a path." Sandor glanced at Sophie as he turned to leave, and his eyes seemed to be saying, "Follow us, or I will clobber you." But there was no way Sophie was going to miss this. "I'm pretty sure that was the freakiest thing I've ever seen," Fitz whispered, as he, Keith, and Bianna caught up with her. "Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I almost peed my pants. Did you see his nose?" Keith curled his finger in front of his face to mime a gigantic bulbous mass. "He could have taken us all out with one sneeze, and his teeth," he shuddered. Fitz and Bianna did too. And the king's gray pointy teeth were terrifying, but Sophie was much more bothered by his eyes. The cold silver orbs, tucked among the lumps and bumps of his face, had a glint to them, a hint of glee that didn't belong on the face of someone coming to a funeral. The crowd toppled over themselves to get out of the king's way, and Sophie and her friends rode the wake, ducking back into the masses when they had a clear view of the stage. The counselors stood hand in hand in a precise line, and their bodyguards had formed two lines surrounding them. One on the ground with their backs against the stage, the other behind them, their swords raised. "King Dimitar," Counselor Emery said from the center of the line, while all 11 counselors bowed as one. "How generous of you to come." King Dimitar bobbed his head in the briefest bow possible, though he didn't have much of a neck, so that might have been the best he could do. His droopy chin seemed to connect directly to his muscle-bound shoulder, giving him a prominent hunch. "I assumed all the kings would be here," he said, turning to study the sea of curious faces. "But perhaps I was too late to catch them?" "No," Counselor Emery said carefully. "They were otherwise engaged." "Of course they were," King Dimitar agreed. "And I'm sure you will have their full support for whomever you elect as your newest counselor." His cold smile said otherwise, and it stretched wider as he scraped one of his teeth with a black fingernail. "I stopped by your capital on the way here, by the way. The damage is far more extensive than I'd been led to believe." That earned him a few gasps from the audience, but Counselor Emery held up his hand. He addressed the crowd, not the king, as he said, "We'd been waiting to share that announcement until we'd completed the memorial proceedings. But yes, King Dimitar speaks correctly. The Everblaze consumed much of Eternalia. However," he paused, waiting for the murmurs to lie down, "the gnomes and dwarves have been surveying the damage and believe they can rebuild before the equinox, which, as you all know, is less than 4 months away. And they've assured us that the new buildings will be greater than the former." Whispers followed. Most of them sounded pleased, though it was a far cry from the cheers Sophie suspected the council had been hoping for. "And when will you hold your election?" King Dimitar asked, triggering another silence. "That is also an announcement we had planned to make momentarily," Emery told him. He closed his eyes like he was listening to the thoughts of the other counselors before he said, "The period for nomination will begin tonight and last exactly 1 week, after which we will work to select our newest member as quickly as possible. And once the counselor is elected," he added, turning to King Dimitar, "a gathering will be held in Luminaria with yourself and all the other leaders so we can prepare to move forward together." "Looking forward to it," King Dimitar told him. One final announcement, since I've covered all the others, Counselor Emery added. Given recent events, we've decided to declare a period of grieving, effective immediately. All noble facilities, including Foxfire Academy, are closed until the new counselor is elected. Sophie glanced at her friends as the crowd hissed with more whispers. No school for at least a week? I assume that includes your legendary sanctuary? King Dimitar asked, forcing Sophie to pay attention. She wanted to strangle something when he added, I'd been hoping to pay a visit before I left. I've heard wonders about your newest transplant. The council better not let him anywhere near Sylvanie, Keith told her under his breath. Sophie nodded, resisting the urge to cheer when Counselor Emery told the king, We must respect the grieving period. Perhaps after the gathering in Luminaria, then, King Dimitar pressed. Yes, perhaps, Counselor Emery agreed. We appreciate your patience and the time you shared with us today. Please bring our regards to the rest of your court. That's it? Sophie asked. A little louder than she meant to, as all 11 counselors bowed. But seriously, what was the council thinking? They should be demanding to know why he was interested in Sylvanie, and if he knew anything about the homing device, and the Neverseen, and the footprints outside the sanctuary. And if he refused to tell them, they should arrest him, or have Alden probe his mind, or something, anything. Instead, they stood silent as King Dimitar dobbed another half-hearted bow and told them, Should you need any assistance from my people, all you must do is ask. We're always there for our neighbors, especially in their hour of need. Thank you, Counselor Emery said, with a tight smile. We ask only what we always do, patience, kindness, and the continued pursuit of peace. King Dimitar snorted, his wide nostrils spraying something wet in the process. But he said nothing further as he turned to leave. Sophie had to bite her tongue to stop herself from screaming, Wait! We have to do something, she whispered to Keith in fits. Like what? Bianna asked. Sophie was pretty sure jumping in front of King Dimitar and demanding he answer her questions wouldn't be very effective, especially when she took another look at his rippled chest. He had muscles on top of muscles, and paired with his freakishly long arms, he could probably tear her in half. But there was more than one way of finding out what he was hiding. I have a plan, she told her friends, before she darted into the crowd, moving parallel to the king. Keith was the first to catch up with her. Okay, I have no idea what you're thinking, but the amount of panic radiating off of you is telling me it's probably not a good idea. It wasn't. This was arguably the most dangerous idea she'd ever had. But what was the point of being an unstoppable telepath if she couldn't use her ability to protect Sylvanie, and maybe even catch Kendrick's killers? Somewhere deep in the back of her brain, a tiny voice reminded her of the laws of telepathy, but a much more desperate voice convinced her that those rules only applied to elves. Plus, she'd broken rules before, when the situation called for it, and if any situation called for it, that was it. Cover me, Sophie whispered. Keith grabbed her arm as she tried to duck behind him. Cover you? How? Don't you think you should at least tell me what your crazy plan is before you start doing it? What crazy plan? Fitz asked, pushing through the crowd to join them. Ask her. She's the one wigging out over here, Keith told him. I'm not wigging out. I'm just trying to do something, and I need you to cover me so that no one knows I have my eyes closed. You better not be doing what I think you're doing, Fitz told her. But he was too late. Sophie had already opened her mind to the Ogre Kings.